All right, so as I said the other day, we are skipping Chapter 4 for the time being and moving on to 5. And I've split 5 into 3 parts. I am hoping to have lecture test number 2 next Thursday. I do not see us getting through all 3 parts of 5, but I also don't want to take a week off in between to, and then give you a test on all that stuff. So we want to get memory in, memory out for you as much as we can. But stay tuned for details at any rate. We'll see how long this one takes, and we'll kind of I'll mentally go from there. Also, as I am in the midst of converting everything to widescreen, there may be some formatting issues, and I apologize. That was a different lecture. So, at any rate, so we're picking up on what I think was a theme we started to develop. Might not have been too self-evident for you, but hopefully you'll see why we're doing this one now. So, 2 words we talked about, pretty sure. Population and a community, okay? So just a reminder then that a population is a group of organisms of the same species living in the same environment at the same time. Same, and same. All right? And a community, then, is a bunch of different populations, same environment, same time. We gave you examples. Probably I talk about squirrels all the time. So we gave you an example, a population of gray squirrel. Okay? And then a community has the gray squirrels, some robins, some blue jays. And again, we can't just say birds because those are different populations within birds. Birds, if you wanted to look almost exclusively at birds, if you could do that, that would be a community. Even though to most of us, yeah, they're all just birds. Some of you know what a robin is and so on and so forth. But all of you know what that is. But remember, population is species. So, and different birds are different species. Which is kind of weird. This is one of those where the more you know, the more you get confused almost. When you switch dogs or cats, let's say from a German Shepherd to a Poodle, you're still in the same species. Cats, you're still in the same species. Cats is a little less obvious because cat's kind of a cat, unless you go into like one of those Maine Coons or what's the other weird one, the Manx. They're obviously different, but otherwise you got short hair, long hair. There's not a huge difference there. But dogs, there's a lot of variation, right? But it doesn't matter as big as they are or as tiny as they are, whatever they look like, throw a pug in the middle there, okay? They're all the same species. So it's very easy to understand why looking out at birds, and you would think that they're all the same species. But they aren't. Same as the squirrels. It's not just, squirrel is fuzziest and it comes in red, gray, black, and whatever. They're different species, so. That's why you've heard, again, with dogs, they say breed. Arguably, we could wedge that into subspecies, but again, they don't even mess around with that. They just go with breed, so. Anywho, I hope I didn't make that less clear in attempting to clear it up. So a community is an entire population, and again, let's not forget that we're not just talking about critters, we're talking about vegetation as well, arguably bacteria, algae, fungi, everything else. but Japo always focuses on the critters. All right, I mentioned this. We didn't have a slide for it before. I think we got into the donkey and mule and horse conversation. So what is a species? A species is a group of similar organisms whose members freely interbreed with one another in the wild to produce fertile offspring. Hence, why you can have a doodle and all those other variations that are out there, right? Because you can put a golden retriever and a poodle, or a Labrador and a poodle, or you could even put a Chihuahua and a St. Bernard if you wanted to. Some obvious logistical issues in there, which we won't get into, but could be done in a lab, so on and so forth. However, other critters that look the same, again, we mentioned a donkey and a horse the other day, where again it is quite possible that in nature, if you could call it farm nature, they could interbreed. They quite frequently do. But the problem is that the critter that they make, a mule, as we said the other day, cannot make other mules. They're sterile, not viable. When they say viable, I even use the word, I might have got rid of the word viable in here. Usually, what we say is viable offspring. Your textbook probably says that as well. I just skipped to the chase here, but out of habit, I use the word viable. Fertile means they can make their own. When we get to the evolution section, which is next, we're going to find out how speciation occurs, which is the act of making new species. All right? And that freely interbreeding becomes very key. Very key. And, well, you put up something like a mountain range or an ocean or even nocturnalism or something, over enough period of time, you could actually separate what was once one species into another, because they don't freely mix anymore. Anywho, what you're used to seeing as species, all right, is technically two. It's genus and species. You don't ever just see the species listed, unless you're like seriously in the field, and maybe conversationally you would say, I don't even think, especially not with sapiens, but again, ornithologists, bird people, or somebody like that, they might just use the last part of this. But almost always you're going to see the genus, which is one step above species. I don't know how much you guys remember about your biology. Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Remember all that? Okay. We're just going one notch up with genus. You will see it abbreviated sometimes, like in this case, H period sapiens. But that's in writing. No one's going to say that. What are the golden rules when writing out a species name? It's here, but it might not be horribly obvious. Yeah.
Plural.
Huh?
Put it in plural form?
Plural? No. Well, no. Sorry. I did in this case. I guess it does say sapiens, but that's probably an accident more than anything. In fact, I'll delete that in a second. What else?
Taxonomy.
Huh?
Is it taxonomy, like the name? Every name?
Taxonomy?
Yeah.
Taxonomy. Okay. Taxonomy is the classification system. Yeah. These are sometimes called taxa. But no, like if you were writing this or typing this, you'd have to do something special to the species name. Okay. I think we're like drawing legit blank. Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Put it in ital.
There we go. That's what I was looking for. All right.
It's got to be in italics, all right? Or, as most of us cannot write in italics, some of us do. I'm a lefty. If I don't tilt my paper, I end up writing in italics anyhow. But you underline it, okay? And if you want to be really, really sure, you do both. Generally speaking, when you're typing, you italics is good enough. Usually when we're handwriting, we underline. I did both in this case. And there's one other thing. Genus is capitalized, species is not. So you notice sapiens is lowercase there. And I will get rid of that last S. So I don't have other examples here, but Canis familiaris, Canis lupus. All right. Canis familiaris is domesticated dog. Canis lupus is wolf. I don't think it's Felis familiaris. I think it's Felis domesticus for the cat, and so on and so forth. So capital Canis, capital C, and then lupus L would be lowercase. The whole thing would be italics or underlined or again. And typically, we're the exception to this rule, and there's probably a couple others. You would have, again, as this is a folder system, a nesting system, you would have other species within a genus. Okay, at the moment, it's just us. I mentioned the word subspecies a little earlier. Again, technically speaking, we are Homo sapiens sapien. Folks that care about stuff like that drew a line right around Ice Age, when we kind of left our caveman, if you would, roots behind. We've been changing ever since. And some people will even draw another one in there. If you notice, like if you or your family does, you guys probably don't go antique, not that group yet. But anyone in your family has antiques and stuff. Things like tables and chairs used to be a whole lot lower. We're getting taller as a species. I'm quite short myself. I feel often dwarfed by a lot of my friends and colleagues and whatnot. But generally speaking, we're getting taller. So a lot of old furniture is when you notice that, they used to make it a lot lower. That wouldn't necessarily give us a change in species or anything like that, just saying that we do change over time, so on and so forth. But going to sleep. What's it doing? Okay, so when we talk about a species in a community, we are, again, sharing a lot of words that we used in the last lecture. Trophic levels coming back. Okay? Is the species a producer? Is it a consumer? Is it a decomposer? Wrapped into that, is it predator or prey? Again, we only half joked about consumers, the herbivores. You don't really think of that as a predator, but they are. Eating that grass, the grass can't exactly run away from that mean, nasty sheep or that bunny rabbit. Symbiotic relationships, symbiosis. Who wants to remind us, roughly speaking, what symbiosis is?
They both benefit.
Yeah. All right, it's a relationship, sort of the opposite of parasitic. And we'll see all this stuff again. I'm just seeing what you guys remember. All right. Everyone knows parasite, parasitic. Symbiosis is both people get something out of it, or both organisms get something out of it. And I don't know why I picked just symbiotic here, but. And lastly, do they have competition in the community? Is there something else that needs the same resources that they need? I've often remarked to those when it comes up, which isn't often, that I haven't seen a whole lot of raccoons since I've moved here. But I see a whole lot of skunks, much more than I ever did in places I've lived before. Raccoons and skunks sort of live in the same, not to pull out a word we haven't used yet, but they're sort of in the same niche, okay? So, maybe there is some competition. I've seen a few dead raccoons along the side of the road, okay? But in South Utica and New Hartford, where at least I've existed since I've been here, I don't remember what we had in East Utica. I wasn't there long enough. But I'm guessing, again, still skunks. But, you just don't see them both. And they opted not, or there was a time period where there was competition, and the skunks won. Raccoons decided it wasn't worth getting sprayed or whatever they do when they actually fight each other. I don't know if skunks use that against other critters. I do wish they'd learn that it's not very effective against cars, the poor thing. That is their one defense mechanism, and they turn and spray when a car's coming. It doesn't do a damn thing. But at any rate, so these are all things we need to consider. Okay, were you evaluating an ecosystem, for example, or a species' role in an ecosystem? Speaking of ecosystems, here's one. The rotting log ecosystem, or the rotting log community. Never really think about that. You're walking along in the woods, you mindlessly kick it out of the way. Some of you actively roll it over to look for roly-polies or maybe a newt. But most folks don't ponder. Or when you see a lichen or something growing off the side, a toadstool maybe you call it. I don't know what you guys growing up here call those weird little white things that grow out the sides of trees and stuff. All kids, I hope you guys still grew up wandering around in the woods at least a little bit. But, everyone has their own little colloquial terms for them. But at any rate, you don't think of that more than likely as a community. But it is. I'm not going to, read off every single one of these things to you. It's more of just a kind of stare at it for a moment or two. Even to the point down on the right side there, where we've got fresh vegetation growing. Okay, some seeds found that to be a soil-like substrate for them. One of the coolest things, and I've only seen them in one part of the in my travels. They call it live oak. If you've ever seen a TV show or a movie, or you've been far enough south yourself, the trees that have the moss growing in and amongst the leaves, and they're all droopy and drapey and everything, very, very cool looking. You've got multiple species, living right there. Again, you could probably call that a symbiosis. Well, you would call that a symbiosis. Oftentimes in the nooks where one branch meets the main trunk, if it's a big enough spot, you'll see that over time leaf litter and so on and so forth accumulates in there, some critter poo and whatnot, and you'll see vegetation growing in there too. Very neat stuff. This is, as it says at the very bottom there, detritivores and decomposers. Just a community of those. Now, who might stop by to graze here, like at Subway or Chipotle? You might find some birds coming in and so on and so forth. They visit this community. They don't necessarily live in it, but they could certainly interact with it. All right, there's that word. And again, I apologize, the text is a little small. I did just not only make this widescreen, but I changed the formatting of the slide a little bit to make it more colorful, and it defaulted to a smaller text. Can you guys see that in the back? Okay. Before I post it, I will enlarge it. So I use the word niche. Some people say niche. I feel niche is a bit pretentious, but feel free to say what you want to say. We all have a little bit of pretension in us. It's just when we use it. That is the difference. A niche is your place in the world, right? It's, again, with humans, we don't necessarily talk about in the environment of the ecosystem, what is our niche? If you were to use this word, you generally mean, your role, what you do in life. When we talk about a critter, we talk about this in environmental science or ecology, it takes on a much bigger meaning. It's original meaning. Now, totality of an organism's adaptations, its use of resources, and the lifestyle to which it's fitted. Ugh, I did not write. That's got to be out of your textbook. Okay. I would never say totality. Again, I say a lot of pretentious stuff, but totality ain't one of them. All the physical, chemical, biological factors an organism needs to survive, stay healthy, and reproduce. I would say that it has, which allow it to live in a particular place. That last bullet sounds like me. An organism's place and function within the environment. But that is, and this is why evolution comes next in this conversation. I can't stress that enough. Okay? You have a set of characteristics. And because of those characteristics, you can survive in a particular place. Now, there might be a couple places that you could make a go of it, but there's one place more than likely where you are best suited for. All right, and that is your niche. Now, you think, well, wait a minute, why can't I adapt? We hear adaptation all the time and so on and so forth. You could argue that you have the ability to adapt built in you already, and that gets into that, well, I could live here. You could live in the desert. It wouldn't be great, but if you did this, that, and the other thing, you could probably make it work. But you're much more suited to an environment like you're in. So on and so forth. But you have that ability built into you already. And this is, again, one of those times where I argue that as humans, we're sort of out of this conversation. We can build air conditioners. We can build heaters. We could build a dam and send water hundreds of miles off of its course to grow grass in the middle of Arizona. Well, we're smart little monkeys, okay? Again, we're talking about more crittery critters when we're having these conversations. Yes, some crows can use tools and so on and so forth. Yeah, but they're not, they're not doing agriculture or whatever. All right? It's different. It's different. So a niche is your place and what you do in that place. And it's usually pretty narrowly defined. There's unfortunately, lots of more vocabulary coming that when I'm explaining some of these ideas now, we're going to end up giving you a term for them at some point, okay? Habitat. You've heard of that. Habitat. It is an environment in which an organism or a population of organisms lives. That is only part of your niche, though. Remember I said where you live and what you do. but you've heard this word, you've possibly used this word. We're going to put it now in this context for you. Now, let me see if it's going there next. I made it too small to read. Just in case we don't go there next. Okay. Remember those words about trophic levels, whether you're an herbivore, whether you're a predator, whether you're prey. That's the what you do part. Okay. So habitat and arguably trophic level, right, would define your niche entirely. That should be a slide. It doesn't look like it is. At least it's not next. Okay, there's actually a couple of vocabulary words embedded in here. And there might be a third on the next page. So I kind of talked about this already. Remember I said we're going to start giving you vocabulary words for stuff we already talked about. So there's fundamental niche versus realized niche. So typically speaking, an organism is not using all of the resources that it can or living in as many habitats as it can. We talked about this. You could make a go of it in the desert. You could, you can't live at the bottom of the sea. I suppose with a lot of modifications. Very special dome and so on and so on. We won't go there. Just think like Sandy Squirrel from SpongeBob or something. But at any rate, fundamental niche is anywhere that you could live. And again, for folks that are trying to figure out ecosystems and balances and so on and so forth. And again, when we talk about evolution, because we're going to see that, remember the word I used, speciation, origin of a new species, tends to occur in the outskirts of these fundamental niches, out on the perimeters. You hardly ever see speciation in the comfortable normal zones. And realized niche is, again, where you, I don't necessarily say choose to live, but where you do end up living and doing your thing. So fundamental is all the possibilities. Realized is where you actually are. Now, why differentiate? I kind of answered that question already. Let me see what the next slide says. I'm not sure if I don't necessarily go into it explicitly. So, let's throw that out to you guys, I guess. You should maybe come up with an answer or two here. Why might you not be in some of your other available niches? Let's say you had the choice to live in a couple different places. What reason or reasons might put you into your realized niche instead? Kind of a weird question, but think about it, I guess, for a minute or two.
Well, part of our balanced diet is fruit and vegetables. So if you put us in a desert, there's not going to be any of this.
Okay.
Or water.
All right, so food choice. Water availability. Excellent. What else? Again, assuming you had the choice. We could turn that around and just say that here is a hell of a lot more comfortable. Right? So, but if you were forced to, again, let's be generic and corny. Let's say some bullies move into your neighborhood. All right? And they take over your neighborhood, and you're forced to leave. Go to the desert.
I don't know, weaving a weird story, but you get where I'm going with this. You could survive out there. You guys probably do this in life when you're trying to talk to someone, explain something to someone, and you make up a story, and you're like, okay, yeah, not the best example, but that happens up here too sometimes. All right, every year I say I'm going to look this sucker up before we talk about it, and I leave the classroom. And if I do Google it real quick, I promptly forget and don't put more about it in the slides. Your textbook talks about these guys, and they do compete for environmental space. Again, you could argue gray squirrel and red squirrel, something a little more localized. I just found out a lot of information about red squirrels over the weekend. If this person was to be believed, and I have fairly good reason to trust their information, red squirrels are quite the bullies. And they would totally get rid of the gray squirrels given the opportunity. So, similar could be said with these guys. Let's see what the next slide brings us. Absolutely nothing. That's what I thought. I think it's in the next slide. I see green and brown circles overlapping. I'm guessing that's the two critters. So the reality niche. Remember how I told you there was another niche coming up? We had fundamental and we had realized. So natural communities consist of numerous species which can compete with one another. You knew that. The interactions among these species produce the realized niche, the reality niche, of each species. Right, we had fundamental. What did we have a second ago? Yeah, fundamental and realized. Okay, sorry. Not a new one. Reality is a different word. I don't know why I used reality there. I think I was trying to prove a point. So interactions among these species. This is the bully example I just gave you. But again, I just don't know enough about animals, or even how to pronounce animal. Could be anole. I don't. So fundamental niches of these two lizards initially overlapped. The brown anole, we're just going to say anole. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that. Eventually outcompeted the green anole, thereby reducing the green anoles. That's just a strange word to keep using over and over again. Realized niche. So in the first example here, all right, we have this overlap. And over here, the green guys are doing great. Over here, the brown guys are doing great. But there's that area in the middle. All right. And you can think of numerous situations in real life, okay, where, again, you're not lizards, but something is out there where you're trying to get the research. Maybe it's the new video game came out. You don't buy physical copies anymore, I know that, but still, you know that GameStop has 6 of them, okay? And you got to get there just in time to get it before, your buddy's going, or who some other people you don't even know are going to go there and get it. All right, so GameStop is in that area there. And then, again, we're going to get kind of silly in this conversation, but turns out that the GameStop on this side of town, there's still 2, right? One in North Utica, one over here. One in Rome, I think, too. Let's say North Uticans claim the one up there, and they don't let any South Uticans go there to shop. Okay, they stand outside with sticks and clubs and everything like that. Okay, now you just lost that chunk. You can't go there anymore. Same idea, but over like ants. Okay, or a really nice sunny spot on the tree. It's resources. And you need resources to survive.
So competition for resources, we're looking at interaction amongst organisms that vie or compete, if you would, for the same resource in an ecosystem. So you got intraspecific and interspecific. So not only do you have to worry about other critters, but you got to worry about your own critters. There's always going to be those type A's, right? So intra is individuals of the same species in a population. Inter is different species. I still to this day get confused with inter-office male and intra-office male. I don't know. We don't do a whole lot of paper mail anymore on campus, but there certainly was a time. And one, of course, you didn't need a stamp for. You just had to put it in an envelope, write what department you wanted to go to, and our little mail couriers would get it there. But if you wanted to send it to, somebody at a different school, inter, well, then you got to put a stamp on it. It leaves our little local system and so on and so forth. So there's two kinds of competition: intraspecific competition and inter-specific competition. And I know that survival of the fittest is starting to creep into your brains now when we talk about intra, okay? That's like the worst thing they could have ever done to evolution was use that term. I'll rant about that when we get there, but it doesn't quite always mean that the biggest, strongest, most attractivist critter wins. A lot of times it does, but not always. And again, with humans, is totally different. We've got a seriously skewed set of things that we look for in each other. Out there, it's pretty simple. Ecological niche. Ecological niche. Species structural, physiological, and behavioral adaptations determines its niche as well as its tolerance for extremes or stressors. Now, again, I cannot emphasize enough that adaptations doesn't mean changing, because that is exactly how we use it. Every time we use that word. Oh, adapt. Suck it up. You'll be fine. That isn't what we mean here. It really sort of means able to live. In this. These are characteristics that already exist that allow you to exist in a space. They're not changes you make to live in a space. You may change your behavior, but you were pre-wired, pre-ability to do that. Even if you have to extract it to that definition of that word. As well as its tolerance for extremes and stressors. You may have friends that just do nothing, absolutely nothing, but whine when they're too cold or too hot. Okay, again, a really silly example, but something to latch on to here. Just because they whine about being cold, they might actually be better adapted to living in the cold than you are. Or the heat. Can't tell you how many times I heard the joke, being the fat guy I am. Oh, that's insulation. You'll be fine. That's just more to get cold, man. Just more to get cold. So, everyone has their different different, what's the word I want? Tolerances. Stressors. All right. Stressors are things that's how you react to certain stimuli. You can think of it simply as stress, like we do, but it's reactions to stimuli. Be they predator-prey, be they even food shortages. If any part of an organism's habitat is outside of its tolerance, the organism cannot live there. And again, this is where we need to remove thinking about ourselves. I try to make it about us or something you can picture as much as I can, okay? But we have done many things. We're talking about terraforming Mars, for crying out loud, okay? Not in this conversation, but you know that that's what we're hoping to do. Squirrels and green animals aren't doing that. The bass in the stream isn't doing that. So on and so forth. Water lily in the desert and cactus in the pond. Okay? That cactus may think it looks really beautiful out there in the middle of that lake, but there ain't a damn thing it can do to make itself live there. And vice versa. Questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, otherwise. This is some pretty heavy stuff if you take it below surface level. We're really explaining the entire blueprint of what's going on around you. Again, if you absorb it that much. And I've found that a lot of folks, unlike geology or earth science that I also teach, those of you that take environmental science tend to take it because you do think about stuff like that. Sometimes you just heard it was the easiest of the science classes, which I don't agree is right, but correct. But because there's a lot of different sciences in this one, this class in particular, geology as well. But generally speaking, you guys tend to have an interest in this. So hopefully, even if it's not sinking in right now, it will at some point. So what could be one of those stressors? All right, that's what this limiting resource is. What could make a particular environment unlivable for you? It's a lot of stuff. We just picked a handful. Temperature, precipitation, food, actual living space. And by that living space, we mean, if you live in a tree, or you live under a rock, or have to live in water, and so on and so forth. That's what we mean by living space. There's only so many trees in the forest. How many squirrels can you put in each tree, and so on and so forth. But those first three, those are super easy to picture, process. You gotta love scientists and their graphs. So we have our typical bell curve here. All right. And what do we got? We got number of individuals on one axis and amount of limiting factor, very vague there, as your other axis. And that, I don't know what color that is, green line, bluish green line, all right, is the number of individuals, number of organisms that can live. Now, it's kind of maybe weird to think about too much being a constraint, but I'm not going to, I can't think of anything right off the top of my head where too much of something might be a bad thing. I suppose too much water could be, not great if you don't like a lot of water. If you're a plant, for example, or a critter. But anywho, minimum, not enough, is very easy to understand, right? So you got that sweet spot right in the middle. And again, we could be talking about a population, or we could be talking about a community here. 99.9 times out of 10, out of 100, I think I was going to say percentage at the time. 99.9% of the time, you're talking about a community, right? You're talking about multiple populations looking at a single resource. So you've got lots of organisms, different types of organisms, competing for that resource. And just a little foreshadowing again, this shows that periphery that I was talking about, where speciation tends to occur. Let's say we are talking about water here, and we'll go on the minimum side here. You've got some organism or some population of organisms that are born with a genetic anomaly that allows them to retain water slightly better than their peers. Okay? Again, think of a population of squirrels or whatever. They interbreed almost exclusively with themselves. Even something minor can get passed around pretty quickly. Okay? We're not talking about squirrels in this case, but just, again, as an example you could visualize. So some anomaly just happens, a genetic mutation where, okay, I'm stuck with squirrels, where this squirrel doesn't sweat as much as all the other squirrels around it. Okay? That's assuming squirrels sweat. But it retains water better. Doesn't pee as much. That's easier to picture. Don't picture a squirrel peeing, but you know what I mean. All right. If pushed back to that desert, extremes are the easiest thing to talk about. It may not dehydrate as quickly. It could last longer in between those rainy events, so on and so forth. So where the majority of the squirrels would perish almost immediately out on the periphery, all right, this one little population can make a go of it. And if they live long enough to keep breeding, that trait or that characteristic will stay in there. And now all of a sudden we've got desert squirrels. So that's how this all fits together. Again, bigger picture. And we've got a whole PowerPoint to talk about that. But just as I said, some foreshadowing. Or as you kids say nowadays, spoiler alert. All right. Looks like we're actually going to head there now, at least for a little while.